Well, as you look around the world, I know we can scour the news and just see that things just aren't right? We've got homelessness, refugees, we've got children who go hungry, women who are used and abused, people battling addiction and sickness and disease. We see oppressive governments, acts of terror, devastating lives all around. We all know in our hearts that things shouldn't be this way, that there's something wrong in our world. We see it with our eyes, we know it in our hearts, and our stomachs ache when we see all that's going on. In the 1970s, there was a solution offered to the world that would revolutionize and bring a new way of life. And I thought I would share that with you this morning.
I'd like to buy the world a home and furnish it with love. Grow apple trees and honeybees and snow white turtle doves. I'd like to teach the world to sing with me. I'd like to buy the world a home and keep it company.
Yes. So this eclectic group of young adults gather on this hilltop in Italy for all the world to see, with the idea that they just need to buy the world a Coke, right? And that would then furnish homes with love, and people would sing together in perfect harmony. I remember, you probably all remember that. You think it's such an ideal, it may be naive solution to combat the injustices of our world. If we could only just purchase someone this delicious carbonated beverage, then people would study war no more. We would grow apple trees and killer bees and snow white turtle doves. And they assured the world that this was the real thing. Of course, 50 years have passed since this was introduced, and we're not singing and living in perfect harmony. And sometimes we think maybe the world has gotten worse. And probably the answer should be Pepsi, because that's the choice of the next generation. Right? But if it only were true, if only we had to do is just go out and buy people Coke and everyone would live in harmony. But that's the real thing, right? That's the real thing, that we were created to see the world and know that there's something wrong, right? That when God created us, when God created the world, He knew that it was good. He said it was good. He formed humanity in His own image, and He said, this is very good. And so deep inside of us, at the very foundation of who we are, there's this instinctive desire for goodness. Of course, sin comes into the picture and distorts and wrecks that image. Our understanding of what it means to be good is now permanently distorted. We've been robbed of this purpose. This good life that God has designed for us has been altered. And so over the past few weeks, we've been talking about this good life, right? This blessed life that God has for us. That Jesus came, and He came to the world offering us the keys to happiness. But it's not the happiness that we think that we want. We look for happiness that meets our own desires. We want to feel good about ourselves, and we want to our happiness is focused on our own selfish living most of the time. But Jesus, in His Sermon on the Mount, He exposes that that's not the happiness that we need to be seeking. Right? He said true happiness isn't found in our self-centered pursuits. He says that true happiness is found in a different way. Right? If you want to be truly happy, madly happy, deeply happy, then you look to the poor in spirit, to the mourning, to the meek, to those who hunger and thirst for righteousness, to the merciful, to the peacemakers. and to the persecuted. But our world tells us if you want to be happy, if you want to live in a home that's furnished with love and sing in perfect harmony, then buy the Coke, right? But Jesus says if you want to be happy, if you want to experience the true joy of the Lord, well then blessed are those who hunger and thirst for righteousness, for they will be filled. Our satisfaction isn't found in a simple sip of soda. We are designed by God to crave justice and righteousness in our world. A blessed life is a life that's hungers and thirsts to make right what is wrong. And in doing so, we find that hunger is filled. Perhaps you've been here before. It's about 4:30, and you're thinking, well, I got to start working on dinner, and one of your kids comes up and says, "Can I have a snack?" Of course, no, you're thinking. What, that if I can't give you a snack now. I'm about to start working on dinner, but I'm hungry. Can I have a granola bar or a cheese stick or even a piece of fruit? We all know if we say okay, then you'll spend about 30 minutes getting dinner all together, and then sit down and like, I'm not hungry. And in your mind, it seems logical when you try to explain it, but they say, no, I'm hungry now. I'm wasting away. If I don't eat, I'll be malnourished. This is not the hunger Jesus was talking about. A few days ago, I had probably an early lunch. I probably ate around 11:30-ish. Maybe that's a little early lunch. And then the day rolled on. I had a lot of different things to do. And so around 7:30, I hadn't eaten yet. To quote Winnie the Pooh, there was a rumbly in my tumbly. And this hunger maybe starts turning to hangry, where you get a little bit angry and annoyed at every little thing. And I wasn't really even able to eat until around 9 that night. This is not the hunger Jesus is talking about. A few years ago, I took a group of students and adults to a place called Heifer International Ranch. We spent 3 days there and 2 nights doing their global poverty simulation. And we were given little food and even littler food, or little supplies and littler food. And one night we had what my daughter and others refer to as spicy water. We had like 1 egg kind of boiled in this water with some onion and some cayenne pepper. She loved it. I thought it was gross. The next day we had a bunch of other tasks to do, and then there was no real breakfast. There was no lunch. By that end of the day, we were all hungry. Somehow we were able, through the simulation, we were able to buy our group a can of Spam and a couple potatoes, and luckily we had a chef as part of our little team, so it was a pretty good meal for not having food for a while. But is this the hunger that Jesus is talking about? It's getting closer, I think. Another activity I've been a part of is something called the 30-hour famine, where participants go for 30 hours without eating food. And during that time, you have lessons on what poverty is like all around the world. You serve at local service options. You go for this 30 days, and you're giving people just this first-hand experience of what it's like to face hunger on a day-to-day basis. Is this the hunger Jesus is getting at? Well, almost. You see, this idea of this 30-hour famine isn't just some random number they pulled out of a hat. It's based on this statistic that, in third world and developing countries, there's people go an average of 30 hours between meals. And this meal isn't broken with a large pizza or a supersized combo meal. They maybe get some rice or some beans to kind of take away some of those hunger pains. But it's nothing to really satisfy the true hunger. That hunger is still there. And this is really what the hunger is that Jesus is getting at. It's not something that can be satisfied with an afternoon snack or an early dinner. It's not when a person just elects to miss a few meals, but able to get some more on a daily basis. The hunger that Jesus is implying is that the people that are starving, they don't have enough to satisfy, and they go from day to day being perpetually hungry. Jesus says, blessed are those who hunger and thirst. If you want to experience true happiness, you need to feel hungry. Deeply hungry, painfully hungry, desperately hungry. Blessed are those who are perpetually craving, yet not satisfied. But they're not craving food or drink, they're craving righteousness. Blessed are those who hunger and thirst for righteousness. What is this righteousness that Jesus is talking about? In his book on the Beatitudes, Pastor Darrell Johnson explores this theme of righteousness throughout the Bible. And as he explores it, he shows us that righteousness is centered around relationships. He says this: righteousness is all about living in faithfulness to the terms of relationship. Righteousness, therefore, means in right relationship or right relatedness. And he goes on to explain that from how God created us, we can see this in Genesis 1 and 2, that humans were created for 4 basic relationships. Relationship with God, relationship with others, relationship with ourselves, and relationship with the earth. And when these relationships are off balance, when they're being ignored, when they're being used and abused and manipulated, then we're not living in a right relationship, right? And if things aren't right, then it's causing consequences all over the world. So when a person chooses to go against God's holy standards, when they turn away from what God desires for them, and they try to make it through life on their own strength, this is we realize this is not how things should be. And we begin to face the consequences of that broken relationship. When a person takes advantage of another person, when they begin to lie and cheat and manipulate, murder and steal, we begin to damage these interpersonal relationships that we were created to coexist in. And this is then how we realize that things aren't how they should be, and we face the consequences of our broken relationships. When a person mistreats themselves, they overindulge or underindulge, and they seek to satisfy that God-shaped hole in their lives with something to numb the pain, we realize that this is not how things should be. We face the consequences of these broken relationships. When people abuse God's creation for their own selfish desires, they rob the earth of the beauty that it is created to express. They find that the earth can be fighting back. We realize that this is not how things should be. We face the consequences of these broken relationships. As we journey through life, experiencing these ongoing broken relationships with God, ourselves, and others in the world, there's a deep longing in ourselves, and we realize that things aren't how they should be. We begin to hunger and thirst for righteousness. So when we see people in our community who don't know Jesus and we ache for them, that's the hunger for them. When we hunger, when we hear about people caught in addiction, or people being abused, we know that this isn't right. We hunger when we see the wicked prospering and the poor struggling, and we want to do something about it. We hunger when we hear violence and atrocity in this world, and we want there to be peace. We hunger when we hear about racial injustice and discrimination and how it's tearing our heart apart. We want there to be restored. We hunger when we think about people all over the world who go without food, or people who have no access to clean water. There is a hunger, a God-given hunger inside you and me, a craving for this world. Now, but I have to admit, there are times when I see the injustice of our world, and my thought is, well, I'll just buy the world a Coke. I recognize that there's a problem, and I wish I could do something about it. I have this euphoric dream that, maybe I could do something about it. I could do something to help. But then maybe I drive past a homeless person. I wish I could do something to care for that person. I would love to buy them a Coke. teach them to sing in perfect harmony, but I keep driving. The author of James, Jesus' half-brother, he writes about this hypocrisy. He says that if a brother or sister is without clothes and lacks daily food, and one of you says to them, "Go in peace, stay warm and be well fed," but don't give him what the body needs, what good is it? So if we see a real need, but all we do is say to somebody, "Well, stay warm, be fed. Here's a coat, go furnish your imaginary home with love." This is not the beatitude-filled life that Jesus wants us to live. Of course, there are times where that hunger for righteousness makes me feel a little uncomfortable. I haven't eaten for a couple hours, and maybe I should do something about it. Maybe I'll give $1 to that person on the street, or I'll write a note to children, the kid I sponsor, or I recognize that things aren't the way they should be, and I want to do something about it, so I try to find something to help take away that hunger. Maybe I'm moved by compassion, maybe I'm moved by guilt, maybe I'm just trying to impress someone. But I just want to get rid of that feeling so I can move on with my day. This is not the beatitude life that Jesus wants us to live. Then there are those times when I truly find myself hungering for something, like I did at the Heifer Ranch. I see brokenness in our community, in our world, and I have a deeper desire to do something about it. So there are times where I've volunteered at a soup kitchen, or I've organized our 6K to raise money for water all over the world. Or years ago, I organized several different shoe drives where we collected thousands of pairs of shoes to be distributed to people all over the world. My hunger for righteousness makes me uncomfortable enough to go ahead and do something. But eventually, that craving subsides and I move on. This is not the hunger, the beatitude life that Jesus asks us for. But there are those people who see injustice. They see the broken relationships of our world, and they're truly hungering to make things right. In our small groups, we've been using this book called The Good Life, where Pastor Durham Gray, he talks all about these Beatitudes. And in this week's chapter, he's talking about a man that he knew who came from Africa. He lived in a village in Africa. He was able to come to America to college. Eventually, as he got older, he was living in America. He remembered the people in his village and the surrounding communities and how they didn't have shoes. And so he put together this charity and had a goal to give away 1 million pairs of shoes to children all over the world. This is a person who is hungering and thirsting for righteousness. And we see examples of that all around us. I think about the women who run the Esther residences we've talked about. These are people who hunger and thirst for righteousness. Our Sunday school teachers and our small group leaders who hunger and thirst for people to grow in faith. I think of Judy and her connection with Alcoholics Anonymous, and just her hunger for people to escape addiction. Mimi shared with me the story, and I asked her if I could share it with others, and she did. It's a powerful story about a family that's hungering and thirsting for righteousness. You may be aware that about a month or so ago, Mimi's had a great-grandson born, little Riker. I haven't met him, but I hear he's adorable. Right? You see, this little boy's birth parents were drug addicts. There's Mimi's grandson was a drug addict, and his girlfriend were, and they found themselves pregnant with a child they didn't want. So here's a baby, about to be born into the world, who's going to be born addicted to drugs, facing a life of neglect, of parents who would not want anything to do with him. And so Mimi's granddaughter, the sister of this man who's about to have a baby, knew the situation, and her heart ached with that little boy. And she knew that she needed to do something more than just buying him a Coke, wishing him good luck, or even helping pay for some of the hospital bills, or just watching him now and then. that wasn't enough for her. So let me set the stage. So this is a woman who's married. She has 4 kids of her own. The oldest had just graduated high school and was off to college. The youngest is around 9 years old. And so they're a family of about 9 to 10 years away from being empty nesters. And so, but they're in the thick of raising their own kids. But they saw this baby. They knew what was going to happen. And so they decided as a family to adopt baby Riker. This whole family agreed to not just to take care of him here and there, but to welcome him into their home as a son, as a brother, and the courts have granted them full adoption. It's a powerful story. They didn't make the choice just to care for him a little bit. They made him one of their own. Jesus says, "Blessed are those who hunger and thirst for righteousness, for they will be filled." What does that mean? What does that mean to be filled? Well, we can think about Jesus when he says, "I am the bread of life. No one comes to me will ever be hungry." Or Jesus saying, "Whoever drinks from the water that I give will never be thirsty." On one level, Jesus is saying that you come to me, eat this bread, drink this cup. Only through me can we find and restore these broken relationships. Only Jesus can truly satisfy. It's totally true. And then within that, the way that we satisfy that hunger that he's given us is by joining him in the process of making things right. And so if you want to be satisfied, you want to find satisfaction in that hunger that's inside of you, it's joining Jesus in that process. Pastor Gerwin Gray says that you are the answer to someone's prayers. Someone is praying right now. God wants to use you to answer their prayers. That justice that the world longs for is found in you. The King of Heaven gives you the righteousness, gives you his righteousness, so that you can express it to the world around you. When we hunger and thirst for righteousness, when we look around our world, we see these broken relationships, this pain and suffering. We can just shout out that this is not right. Well, that's God calling us to be the answer to someone's prayer. That's God urging you to feel that hunger and allow that hunger to invest you and join with God so that you can be satisfied. The hunger, the thirst for righteousness is also contagious. It starts out in one person and it begins to pass that hunger on to others. As they begin to feel that hunger, it just passes along. Pastor Derwin, in his story, talks about a man who was running a prison ministry. And he invited Derwin and some people from their church to come. And they went and they experienced that ministry. And then slowly, the hunger for these inmates was growing. Right? The church even eventually hired one of these inmates that would come out to lead this ministry. And this all began from one person who had a hunger and a thirst to change the lives of these incarcerated men and women. And I can think about Mimi's granddaughter and her family, this tremendous sacrifice that they're making. Imagine the early conversations that they maybe had with their family. The idea of bringing a new infant into the home maybe seemed ridiculous or impossible. But slowly, the thought of caring for Riker became contagious. And now the whole family can't imagine what life is like without this baby. That is what needs to be filled. So let me ask you, what is it that you hunger and thirst for? When you see in our world, you look around and you wonder, what is going on? What do you yearn to make a difference in? You see, God has put in our hearts a desire to make things right. A desire for us to discover a happiness that's found in right relationship. God calls us to share that with others. And so as a congregation, I want us to think about that. How can we hunger and thirst for righteousness? I know each month we collect some offerings for people. We collect for the World Mission Offering. We're collecting for the middle school. We collect every month for something. That's a great way. It's almost like we're taking bites of things. But maybe there's some more deliberate ways, more deliberate things that we can do to help hunger, to feed that hunger and thirst. As you think about it, maybe there's something in your heart that you think, I wish we could do that. Maybe we can. You know, God gives us the strength and the ability. God has put that hunger. If there's something in your heart that you hunger and thirst to be made right, let me know. Bring it up to me. Maybe we can find a way to help with that. We can be that church that's known for hungering and thirsting for righteousness in our world. Jesus declares that those who hunger and thirst for righteousness are blessed. We're not satisfied when we just buy the world a Coke. We are people that deeply long and crave for things to be made right. If we want to find spiritual happiness, we need to join with Jesus, the bread of life, that living water, and become the answer to our world's prayers. Blessed are those who hunger and thirst for righteousness, for they will be filled. Amen.